Homework number 2 is all about the nature of science and scientific observation. Understanding the scientific method is an important aspect in understanding this homework. The biggest struggle students have with this homework is that they feel like they aren't given enough information and they don't know enough about the problems to answer them. I'll show you in this video why this is not the case. Let's look at an example problem similar to the problems you have in the homework. As we know, the first step in the scientific method is to observe something and to have a question about it. So here's a puzzling observation that's given to us. Scientists observe that nuclei in the G1 phase do not undergo DNA replication, but nuclei in the S phase do. So at this point you might be thinking, I'm not sure what the G phase is, I don't know what the S phase is, and you're confused and you give up. Instead, what you should do is you should start to form, at least in your mind, a hypothesis. Go ahead and take a minute on your own to try to come up with a possible hypothesis of why this observation we see is occurring. Know that there's no wrong answers here. Now that you've formed your hypothesis, I'm going to give you a couple examples of maybe a couple possible hypotheses that I came up with. So here's one. Something in the G1 phase is preventing DNA from undergoing replication. That could be a possibility. Here's another possible hypothesis. There is an activator in the S phase that starts replication. And the third that I came up with is transitioning to the S phase may be what causes replication. So like I said, there's not a wrong answer here. A hypothesis is just something that you want to test that could be a possible explanation for why we are observing what we do. The researchers who actually performed this experiment came up with a hypothesis of their own. Let's go ahead and look at that hypothesis. This hypothesis may be slightly different than what you came up with, but that's fine. For the rest of this question, though, we are going to use this hypothesis that the lab came up with. Like it says here, the lab's hypothesis was that a cell in the S phase contains an activator of DNA replication. The next step in any good research is to design an experiment to try to test that hypothesis and either prove it false or see if it might be a possible explanation. Take a few seconds to design a possible experiment on your own for how we might be able to test to see if that cell in the S phase contains an activator of DNA replication. There are many possible experiments that you could have come up with, and even if yours is different than this one, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. But this is the experiment that the lab used to determine if there is some signal in the S cells that stimulate G1 cells to replicate their DNA. Cells in the G1 and S phases were fused together, creating cells with both G1 and S properties. So if you were to conduct this experiment as outlined above, what kind of results would you need in order to support your original hypothesis? So here's that hypothesis here to reference. So what kind of results would you need to support a hypothesis that a cell in S phase contains an activator of DNA replication? Take a few minutes, come up with some of those results that would support this. Here are the results from the actual experiment, and we do see that they support our original hypothesis. After fusing the cells together, both nuclei in the fused cell entered into the S phase, and activation of DNA replication occurs. So on the right here, you can also see all the details of the entire experiment. So if you're confused at this point, take a look at this, and it may provide some further clarification and explanation of all that we just went through. This example we've just walked through should be enough information so that you're able to handle all the puzzling observations in your homework.